My name is Nora, and I'm 61 years old. At my niece's wedding, they made me wear an apron instead of a dress. I cooked, served, and cleared the plates while my family laughed and took pictures. My uncle told everyone I was just the help. But when the bride raised her glass for a toast, she said my name, and the truth that followed turned the entire hall silent. Most days, my life is quiet, maybe too quiet. And I live in the same small house my husband and I built 35 years ago, before he passed away. It sits at the edge of town, with paint that's starting to fade, but a garden that still blooms. I spend my mornings baking bread and watering roses, and my evenings watching the sun dip behind the old maple trees. I don't have much, but I have peace. And after the storms life's thrown at me, peace is worth more than gold. But sometimes peace feels a lot like loneliness, especially when family forgets you exist. That morning, as I kneaded dough on the counter, I got a call from my Uncle Richard, my late sister's husband. His voice was as curt as ever. "Nora," he said, "we're short-handed for the wedding tomorrow. You can help with the food, right?" "No. How are you? No. Would you like to come?" Just a command. I paused, my hands still covered in flour. "The wedding?" I asked, though I already knew which one he meant. His daughter Clara, my niece, my sweet Clara, whom I hadn't seen in months. He didn't answer my question, only added, "We need someone reliable. You've always been good in the kitchen." Then he hung up before I could respond. I stood there, staring at the phone. I wasn't invited as family. I was being summoned as help. My heart sank, but something in me wouldn't let go of the thought of Clara in her wedding dress. I helped raise that girl after her mother, my sister, passed away. I was the one who tied her shoes for school, and who cooked her favorite soups when she had colds, who stayed up with her when nightmares kept her awake. So no matter how insulting the offer was, I told myself, I'll go. For Clara. The next morning, I woke before dawn and packed my old catering apron. I told myself it didn't matter if no one saw me as family. What mattered was that Clara knew I was there, in some way, still taking care of her. The drive to Uncle Richard's estate was long and silent. His house had always made me uneasy. Tall gates, polished floors, and the smell of expensive flowers that never seemed to wilt. Everything about it screamed show, and Richard loved a good show. When I arrived, the staff were already bustling, their eyes tired but polite. They handed me trays and ingredients like I belonged there. And maybe, in their eyes, I did, just another pair of hands. I spent hours preparing the food. The kitchen was hot, crowded, but familiar in the strangest way. Cooking always made me feel closer to my sister, like she was still there beside me, humming as she chopped onions. I made the same roast and potatoes recipe she used to make for Clara's birthdays. Every stir of the spoon was love disguised as labor. As the guests began to arrive, laughter and chatter filled the house. I peeked out briefly, just to catch a glimpse of Clara. She was radiant, her white gown glittering in the afternoon light, her face glowing with the kind of joy I'd always wished for her. For a moment, I smiled, but then I saw Uncle Richard beside her, puffed with pride, shaking hands and introducing himself as though the whole wedding were his achievement alone. No one looked in my direction. Not one person recognized me. Or maybe they did, but chose to pretend otherwise. As the reception began, I carried plates to tables, quietly serving dishes I'd poured my heart into. I overheard snippets of conversation. The food's divine. Who's catering? My uncle's voice chimed in proudly. Ah, yes, local professionals. Only the best for my daughter. He never mentioned my name, not once. At one point, when I stepped into the main hall to clear empty glasses, I heard him bark, "Nora, stay in the kitchen. You're just help. We don't want confusion." The words hit like a slap. My hands trembled around the tray. The guests nearby fell silent for a moment, eyes darting away, pretending not to hear. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. You're just help. As if the years of love I'd given that family meant nothing. I swallowed the hurt, forced a polite nod, and turned back toward the kitchen. But inside, something cracked. Not in anger, just a quiet kind of sorrow that seeps deep. I told myself I didn't come here for him. I came for Clara. Later that evening, as I cleared plates from the bride's table, I dared to look at her. For the first time that day, she wasn't smiling. Her eyes met mine across the crowd, soft, searching, and full of something that looked a lot like guilt. She hesitated, opened her mouth as if to say something, but stopped. The music swelled, and someone pulled her into another photo. Still, that look lingered, like an unanswered question hanging between us. Why did she look guilty, and what was she holding back from saying? The clinking of glasses echoed through the hall, laughter rising like a song I no longer knew the words to. As I moved between tables, collecting plates and refilling drinks, I couldn't help but notice how many of the faces around me were ones I used to know. Children I'd once babysat, now grown, dressed in their finest clothes, raising champagne toasts. There was something painfully ironic about serving food to the same kids who used to sit on my lap and beg for extra slices of cake. I remembered tying one of the boy's shoes once when he cried because his mother was too busy chatting. Tonight, he brushed past me without so much as a glance. Uncle Richard stood near the head table, puffing out his chest, greeting everyone as though he were royalty. His laughter carried across the room, forced and arrogant. I overheard him say, "You know, we like to keep things proper. The help knows their place here. No confusion." He said it loud enough for me to hear. It wasn't a coincidence. I tried to keep my head down, my hands busy, but each word landed like another stone in my chest. A group of guests near the corner gushed about the food. "This roast is perfection," one woman said. "Where did you get your caterer?" Before anyone else could answer, Uncle Richard chuckled. "Ah, yes. I always hire locally. My standards are high. I don't just trust anyone in my kitchen." I bit my lip. I wanted to tell them it was my sister's recipe, his wife's recipe. I wanted to tell them that I stayed up half the night, seasoning and roasting, making sure everything tasted like home. But what good would it do? He'd take the credit anyway. He always did. Still, the guests ate and smiled, and I served in silence. At one point, I overheard two women near the dessert table whispering. One said softly, "Isn't that Nora? The widow who never moved on?" The other giggled. "Poor thing. She's lucky Richard gives her something to do. Otherwise, what would she have?" They didn't know I could hear them, or maybe they didn't care. I kept my back turned, forcing my trembling hands to steady as I laid out slices of cake. My throat burned. The laughter and music blurred into background noise as memories surfaced, the kind you don't invite but can't shut out. I remembered the day my sister Diana passed. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and wilted flowers. I held her hand until it grew cold. Her last words to me were about Clara. "Promise me you'll look after her, Nora. Don't let Richard turn her into one of them." And I did promise. I kept that promise for years. School pickups, doctor visits, birthdays. I taught Clara how to make pancakes on Sunday mornings, how to cut vegetables without crying, how to tell when the stew had simmered just right. Those same recipes, my sister's recipes, filled this wedding hall tonight. The smell should have brought comfort, but instead it carried a sting. A cousin brushed past me with a sympathetic look. "Don't take it personally," she whispered. "You know how your uncle is." I forced a smile, but it didn't reach my eyes. I knew exactly how he was, controlling, proud, obsessed with appearances. But it still hurt, because even if I understood him, I didn't deserve the way he treated me. As the evening wore on, the speeches began. I stayed near the doorway, hidden behind the curtain, just close enough to listen. Clara stood up, radiant in her gown, her hands trembling as she held the microphone. "I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight," she began. Her voice wavered slightly, her smile forced. "It means so much to have all of you. Family, friends." She paused, scanning the crowd. When her eyes briefly met mine, she blinked hard, and for a split second I saw tears gather at the corners of her eyes. Then she looked away. My chest tightened. She wasn't heartless, I could see that. Something inside her was fighting. Maybe guilt, maybe love, but she was trapped under her father's shadow. The applause thundered as she finished her speech, and I slipped back into the kitchen to avoid being seen. I thought I'd escaped the whispers for the night until I heard a group of groomsmen near the back laugh crudely. "Imagine being her age and still working at weddings," one said. "Guess she couldn't find anyone else to marry after the first one croaked." Their laughter stung worse than anything Richard had said. I wanted to disappear. I busied myself with stacking plates, anything to block the noise out. But then I felt a light touch on my shoulder. I turned. It was Clara. Her makeup was smudged, her eyes red. "Aunt Nora," she whispered, her voice trembling, "don't leave yet, please. Stay until the end. I have something to say." Before I could respond, she slipped away again, disappearing into the crowd of satin and sequins. I stood frozen, my hand still gripping a plate. The weight of the evening pressed down on me. Humiliation, memories, confusion, and now, curiosity. What could she possibly have to say after letting me be treated like this? Still, beneath the hurt, a spark of hope flickered. Maybe, just maybe, the girl I once knew hadn't forgotten me after all. As the music swelled again, I couldn't shake the question. What did Clara plan to say? And why now? The night had grown heavier, as though the air itself was waiting for something to break. The laughter that once filled the hall now seemed rehearsed, shallow. Every sound echoed. The scrape of silverware, the rustle of dresses, the clinking of glasses. I moved quietly through it all, collecting plates and glasses, trying to ignore the ache in my chest from Clara's words earlier. "Stay until the end. I have something to say." Her voice had trembled when she said it. It wasn't the command of a bride. It was a plea. I couldn't leave, even if I wanted to. Something told me that the night wasn't done with me yet. The band began to play a soft melody as the final course was served. The room shimmered with candlelight, the air thick with perfume and pride. Uncle Richard stood tall at the center table, laughing too loudly, clinking his glass against anyone willing to humor him. But Clara sat still beside her new husband, her fingers nervously twisting the edge of her napkin. When the music faded, she rose to her feet. The room quieted immediately. "I'd like to say a few words," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. A polite murmur rippled through the crowd. It was unusual. The formal toasts were over. Uncle Richard looked up sharply, confused but smiling, clearly expecting to be praised again. Clara lifted the microphone, her eyes sweeping across the room. "I want to thank everyone who came today," she began. "Your love and support mean the world to me." She paused, her voice trembling slightly. "You've all watched me grow up, through difficult times, and through blessings I didn't always deserve." Richard beamed, straightening his tie like a proud father waiting for his cue. But then Clara's next words cut through the hall like a blade. "I especially want to thank the people who shaped me, who gave me love when I needed it most." She took a slow breath. "My father," she said, glancing briefly at Richard, "was always busy. But there was someone else who filled that silence, someone who cooked for me, comforted me, and reminded me that I was loved every single day." The murmurs started then. Guests leaned in. Richard's smile faltered. Clara continued, her voice shaking. "Aunt Nora, would you please come up here?" I froze. For a moment I thought I'd misheard. All eyes turned toward me, the help standing in an apron near the kitchen doors. My breath caught in my throat. Richard's voice sliced through the stunned silence. "Let's move on, Clara," he said sharply, forcing a laugh. "She's busy. We don't need to—" Clara turned toward him, her tone firm for the first time that night. "No, Dad, I'm not moving on." Gasps rippled through the hall. The tension was thick enough to touch. "This woman," she said, pointing directly at me, "is my true family." I could hear the collective intake of breath, a sharp, synchronized reaction that filled the space between us. My hands began to tremble. I didn't know whether to stay put or go forward. Clara's eyes were locked on mine. "Aunt Nora raised me when no one else wanted to," she continued. "When my mom died, she was the one who made sure I got to school, who made my lunches, who helped me grieve. Everything good in me, my kindness, my strength, my love for cooking, came from her." A stunned hush fell over the crowd. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. Someone whispered, "She's her aunt?" Another voice replied, "I thought she was staff." Richard's face flushed a deep crimson. "Clara, that's enough," he hissed into the microphone. "You're embarrassing yourself." But she shook her head, her voice breaking. "No, I'm telling the truth. You wanted me to forget her. You said she wasn't part of this family, but she is. She always has been." Her tears finally spilled over, glistening under the chandelier's glow. "Mom told me before she died, never let anyone erase the people who loved you first. Aunt Nora loved me first." For a long, endless moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, a few guests began to clap. Hesitant at first, then stronger, braver. Others followed, unsure but compelled. I felt my knees weaken. My vision blurred with tears I didn't even realize were falling. Clara was crying too, her new husband holding her hand as she wiped her eyes. Richard stood frozen. The applause was not for him anymore. He slammed his hand on the table, the silverware rattling. "Enough of this nonsense," he barked, his voice cracked with fury. "You have no idea what you're saying. She's nothing but—" Clara cut him off, her tone suddenly steel. "Don't you dare speak about her like that." A hush swept the room again. I'd never seen her so resolute, so much like her mother. Richard's face twisted with rage. "You'll regret this, Clara," he spat. "If you walk out of this hall with her, you're cut off. Do you hear me? Cut off!" He ripped off his boutonniere and stormed toward the exit, shoving past guests who hurried out of his way. The heavy doors slammed behind him, echoing through the stunned silence. I stood motionless, my heart pounding, my hands gripping the tray like an anchor. Cut off. Was that what she'd been afraid of? Clara's gaze found mine again. Through tears, through everything, and she smiled. A trembling, defiant smile that said it was worth it. But as the whispers began to ripple through the crowd, I couldn't help but wonder, what would happen next now that the truth was finally out? Would Richard really make good on his threat to cut her off? And what would that mean for both of us? The slam of the doors echoed like thunder. Every laugh, every note of music, every clink of glass died instantly. The room froze, the air sharp with tension and the scent of spilled wine. For a moment, no one breathed. Then Uncle Richard's voice bellowed from the entrance, his words thick with fury. "You've embarrassed this family for the last time, Clara." He stormed back in, his face flushed and eyes blazing. "You let that woman, that manipulative widow, make a fool out of me." All heads turned toward me. My heart pounded so loudly I could hardly hear. "Richard, please," I started, but he cut me off with a snarl. "Don't act innocent, Nora. I see what you're doing. You show up uninvited, make yourself useful, and now suddenly my daughter's parading you like a saint. You've been scheming for attention your whole life." I could feel the heat rise to my cheeks, not from shame, but disbelief. I had spent years fading quietly into the background so I wouldn't cause trouble. And now I was being accused of chasing it. Clara stepped between us. "Stop it, Dad. She didn't do anything wrong." He turned on her, pointing a shaking finger. "She's turning you against me. You think your mother would have wanted this circus?" Before Clara could answer, a voice from one of the tables spoke up, firm and steady. It was Marjorie, one of my late sister's closest friends. She rose to her feet, her silver hair glinting under the lights. "That's enough, Richard. Everyone here knows who raised Clara after Diana passed. It wasn't you." A murmur spread through the guests. "She was there," Marjorie continued, her tone unflinching. "She took care of your daughter when you couldn't even handle your own grief. You should be thanking Nora, not humiliating her." Richard's jaw clenched. He looked around, realizing for the first time that the crowd wasn't entirely on his side anymore. "You don't understand," he snapped. "You think she's innocent? She's always had her hand out, always inserting herself into things that aren't hers." The accusation hit like a dart, cruel and sharp. My voice trembled as I finally spoke. "I never wanted anything from you, Richard. Not money, not attention, nothing. I just wanted to make sure Clara was cared for. That's what your wife asked of me." The mention of Diana's name silenced him for a moment. His face darkened, his mouth twitching with something between guilt and rage. He muttered, "Don't you dare use her name against me." "I'm not," I said softly. "But she would be ashamed of what this has become." A hush settled again, thick as fog. People were whispering now, glancing between him and me. I caught snippets. "He's always been controlling. She really raised the girl. So that's what happened after Diana died." Richard straightened his suit jacket, his voice cold and bitter. "You all think you know the story, don't you? You think this woman's a saint. Well, let's talk about what's really going on." He turned to Clara. "Tell them how I've managed every bit of your inheritance since you turned 18. Who made sure your bills were paid? Who kept your mother's estate from falling apart?" The guests shifted uncomfortably. Clara's new husband looked confused. "What's he talking about?" Richard smiled cruelly. Oh, she didn't tell you? Her inheritance, her entire trust, has been under my management since her mother passed. Every penny. The whispers grew louder. A few people gasped. Clara's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't back down. Yes, she said quietly. You controlled it all, but not anymore. Richard blinked. What? She lifted her chin. Yesterday morning, I met with my attorney. I transferred every cent out of your name. A collective murmur spread through the crowd like ripples on water. I'm taking back what belongs to my mother and to me, Clara continued. And from now on, it will be used to honor the people who actually loved us. Richard's face went from red to pale in a heartbeat. You can't. I already did, she said. The silence that followed was deafening. Then a glass shattered somewhere near the bar, the sound punctuating the moment like a full stop. Richard's hands shook as he looked around, realizing his audience was no longer admiring him. They were pitying him. He turned toward me with a glare that could cut glass. This is your doing, he hissed. You've poisoned her against her own blood. I didn't speak. I didn't have to. The truth was already written across every stunned face in that room. He grabbed his coat and stormed toward the doors again. You'll regret this, he shouted, his voice breaking. Both of you. The doors slammed once more, leaving behind an echo that seemed to carry every year of silence and resentment we'd endured. I stood still, unsure whether to cry or breathe. Part of me felt vindicated. The truth was finally out, and not because I'd forced it, but another part of me felt painfully exposed, as if my quiet life had just been torn open for everyone to inspect. Then, through the fading whispers and rustle of movement, I felt a gentle hand on my arm. Clara was standing beside me, her eyes still wet, but filled with something softer. Peace, maybe. Aunt Nora, she said quietly, almost trembling. Please, stay. I have a surprise for you. I stared at her, heart pounding. After everything that had just happened, I couldn't imagine what surprise could possibly come next. What could she still have to show me, after all the truth had already been spilled? The noise of the reception faded behind us as Clara guided me down a quiet hallway. The air grew still, the echo of our footsteps the only sound between us. I could still feel the weight of what had just happened, the shouting, the whispers, the truth finally laid bare. My heart hadn't caught up with it all. Clara didn't speak until we reached a small side room off the main hall, one I remembered from years ago. It used to be Diana's sitting room, filled with sunlight and lilac perfume. The moment I stepped inside, the memories hit me like a wave. Sit down, Aunt Nora, Clara said softly. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached into her clutch purse. There's something I've been meaning to give you. She pulled out a small, cream-colored envelope, sealed with a faded wax stamp. The paper was yellowed with age, the handwriting across the front instantly recognizable. My breath caught in my throat. It was Diana's. For a second, I couldn't move. My fingers hovered above the envelope as if touching it would make her real again. Clara watched me, tears already welling in her eyes. I found it a few weeks ago, she whispered. When I was going through Mom's old chest, I found a bundle of her letters. This one, it had your name on it. She must have written it before she passed. My vision blurred. I took the letter from her hands as gently as if it were made of glass. My fingers shook as I broke the seal and unfolded the paper. The first line was written in that same elegant script I'd seen on every grocery list, every note she used to leave me on the fridge. My dearest Nora, if you're reading this, then I'm no longer there to say these words in person. But, please know, I have never, ever taken you for granted. I pressed a hand over my mouth, trying not to sob. The words blurred as I continued reading. You've always been more than a sister to me. You've been my strength, my comfort, and when I couldn't go on, you became Clara's mother in every way that mattered. Promise me you'll let her grow, even if others try to pull you away. One day, she'll understand everything you've done for her, and when she does, I want her to thank you, publicly and proudly, so the world knows the kind of woman you are. The tears came fast then, unstoppable. I could hear my sister's voice in every word, gentle but firm, full of that same love that carried me through the hardest years of my life. You deserve to be loved loudly, Nora. Don't let the world make you small. My hands trembled as I lowered the letter. The paper was wet with my tears. Clara was crying too now, silent tears that streaked down her cheeks. I didn't know she'd written it, I whispered. All this time, I thought she never got to say goodbye. Clara reached over and held my hand. She did, Aunt Nora. She said everything. I just didn't find it until now. I couldn't stop crying. Your mother was my heart, I said. When she was gone, it felt like the world ended. The only thing that kept me going was you. Clara squeezed my hand tighter, and you kept me going. You kept her alive through your stories, your cooking, your kindness. When I read that letter, I knew I couldn't let this wedding happen without honoring you. That's why I said your name in front of everyone. I wanted to do exactly what she asked me to do, to thank you publicly and proudly. Her words hit me harder than any insult Richard had ever thrown. All the years of silence, of being ignored or dismissed, melted away in that one moment. My heart felt both broken and mended all at once. I looked around the little room, the framed photo of my sister on the wall, the old lace curtains she'd sewn herself, the faint scent of lavender that hadn't faded with time. It was like she was still there, smiling. I wanted to surprise you, Clara continued, her voice thick with emotion. I planned the whole thing weeks ago. I even rehearsed what I'd say about you in front of everyone. I didn't tell Dad because I knew he'd try to stop it. I let out a shaky laugh through my tears. He definitely tried. She smiled faintly. But it was worth it, every second. I just wish Mom could have seen it. She did, I said softly, pressing the letter to my chest. She was right here the whole time. We sat there for a while, both crying, both laughing in that fragile way people do when grief and love blur together. It felt like the years between us had finally vanished. No more distance, no more silence, just family. After a moment, Clara stood up and wiped her eyes. Aunt Nora, she said, her voice trembling again but full of purpose. I'm not done yet. I looked at her, confused. What do you mean? She reached for my hand, a small smile returning to her face. There's one more thing you need to see. I stood, still clutching the letter as though it were a piece of my sister's heart. Clara opened the door, the sound of music and murmured voices spilling back in from the hall. Come with me, she said, back to the main hall. I hesitated for a second, my pulse quickening. Whatever this was, I could feel it. Something big was coming, something that might change everything all over again. As we walked toward the hall, I could see the crowd gathering, and I wondered what surprise could possibly wait for me beyond those doors. The music drifted through the hallway as Clara and I stepped back toward the main hall. My heart thudded against my ribs, the letter from my sister still pressed tightly in my hand. The noise of conversation grew louder with every step. Curious whispers, chairs scraping, glasses clinking. People had seen us slip away earlier, and now every head turned as we reappeared. I could feel their eyes on me. Hours ago, those same eyes had dismissed me as the help. Now they watched in silence, uncertain, perhaps even ashamed. Clara's grip on my hand was firm, almost protective. When we reached the center of the hall, she let go, picked up the microphone, and took a deep breath. I know today has been emotional, she began, her voice trembling but steady enough to command attention. But there's one more thing I need to do before this day is complete. The murmuring stopped. All that could be heard was the soft hum of the lights and the faint rustle of the tablecloths. Clara looked straight at me. Aunt Nora, she said, would you please come stand beside me? My instinct was to shake my head, to shrink back like I'd done my whole life when people stared. But the look on her face, the same look her mother once wore when she was certain of something, left no room for refusal. I stepped forward slowly, my hands trembling. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Someone said, "That's her," in a hushed tone, as if naming a ghost. When I reached her side, Clara took my hand and raised it slightly, like she was presenting a queen. For years, she said, this woman has been treated as someone ordinary. Tonight, I want everyone to understand that she is not. She is my family, my mother, in every way that matters. The crowd erupted, applause rising like a wave. It wasn't polite clapping, it was heartfelt, thunderous, the kind that shakes the air. I stood frozen, unable to process the sound. It felt impossible that these were the same people who'd ignored me hours ago, who'd whispered and turned away. I felt heat rising to my face, embarrassment mixed with something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. Clara wasn't finished, and from this moment on, she continued, her voice breaking, she will sit beside me, where my mother would have sat if she were alive. Please welcome her as what she truly is, the mother of the bride. The applause swelled again. Someone shouted, "About time!" Another person stood up and began clapping harder until the entire room followed. I couldn't stop the tears that spilled down my face. I wanted to speak, to thank her, to protest that I didn't deserve this. But my throat wouldn't let me. Clara guided me toward the head table, past faces that suddenly looked different, softened, kinder, some even ashamed. As I reached the table, I saw the empty chair beside the groom. Clara gestured toward it. "That seat," she said softly, "was meant for you." I hesitated, looking at the vacant spot, directly across from where Uncle Richard had sat earlier, before he stormed out in disgrace. His untouched wineglass still glistened on the linen. The contrast made my heart ache. Clara smiled through her tears. "Please, Aunt Nora, sit." And so, trembling, I did. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, one by one, guests began to approach. A woman I vaguely remembered from years ago, one of Diana's old friends, placed her hand over mine and said, "I had no idea. Thank you for raising her." Then another guest, "Your cooking was incredible, but it's your heart that made this night special." Then another, "We all owe you an apology." Each word chipped away at the years of silence I had built around myself. The weight I'd carried, of invisibility, of shame, started to lift. I could almost feel my sister's presence again, whispering from somewhere beyond, "You see, Nora?" They know now. The applause faded into soft music again. Clara turned to the band and nodded. "There's one last dance I want to do," she said. "It's not with my husband. It's with the woman who made this day possible." The crowd murmured. My heart nearly stopped. "No, sweetheart," I whispered, shaking my head. "This is your day." "It's our day," she corrected gently, reaching for my hand. Before I could argue, she led me onto the dance floor. The music shifted to a slow waltz, tender and familiar. The first notes echoed through the hall. It was the same song my sister used to hum in the kitchen when we cooked together. I couldn't hold back the tears. Clara wrapped her arms around me, resting her head on my shoulder. The room blurred around us. The lights, the faces, the shimmer of glass and silk. For once, the world felt right again. As we turned slowly beneath the chandeliers, I caught sight of the head table and the empty chair where Richard should have been. The space beside it felt symbolic, a hollow shape carved out by his absence and his choices. Outside, through the tall glass doors, I saw a shadow in the garden, Richard. He stood far off near the gate, half hidden in the dark. His posture was rigid, his expression unreadable, but I could tell he was watching. He turned to the man beside him, one of his old business associates, and though I couldn't hear his voice clearly, I saw his lips move. "She'll regret this," he said. "They both will. Soon." A chill ran down my spine, cutting through the warmth of the moment. But before fear could settle, Clara squeezed my hand tighter. The song swelled, the guests clapped, and for the first time in years, I let myself be seen, truly seen, for who I was. Yet even as I smiled through my tears, I couldn't shake the feeling that the night's peace had a shadow, and that Richard's part in this story wasn't over. The morning after the wedding felt strangely still. For the first time in years, I woke up with lightness in my chest. The letter from Diana sat on my bedside table, folded neatly beside a small bouquet Clara had left me. I replayed the night in my mind, her speech, the dance, the applause. It all felt like a dream I didn't want to wake from, but reality always finds its way back. 3 days later, the phone rang. The voice on the other end sliced through my peace like a blade. "Nora." I didn't need to ask who it was. "Richard," I said quietly. His tone was cold, sharp, and laced with venom. "You think you've won, don't you? Parading around like a saint while you turn my own daughter against me." "I didn't turn her against anyone," I replied. keeping my voice calm though my hands shook. She saw the truth for herself. He laughed bitterly. The truth? You mean the lies you fed her since she was a child? Don't pretend to be innocent. You've always wanted what wasn't yours. My wife's attention, my home, now my daughter's loyalty. His words stung more than I wanted to admit. I never wanted anything but peace, Richard. But you can't stand peace unless you're the one controlling it. Careful, he snapped. You might think you're untouchable now, but I have power and money. If you think I won't fight back, you're wrong. What is it you're fighting for? I asked softly. You already lost what mattered most, her respect. He went silent for a moment, then hissed, I'll make sure people see who you really are. I'll destroy that reputation you think you've built. You'll regret ever crossing me. And then he hung up. The silence afterward was deafening. My hands trembled as I set the phone down. The room suddenly felt colder, darker. I wanted to believe his threats were empty, but I knew Richard. He didn't let go of grudges easily. That evening I called Clara. She answered on the first ring, her voice full of concern. Aunt Nora, are you okay? I told her everything. The call, his threats, his accusations. She listened quietly, then said firmly, He can't error in message stream, retry. A week after the wedding, the chaos finally began to settle. The house was quiet again, the kind of quiet that used to sting, but now felt strangely comforting. I sat at my kitchen table, the morning light spilling across the same wood my husband once built by hand. The letter from my sister lay beside my teacup, folded neatly but worn at the edges from how many times I'd read it. Every time I touched that paper, I could almost hear her voice again. You deserve to be loved loudly. For the first time in years, I believed it. But just as I was beginning to feel like life had calmed, there came a knock at my door. It was late morning, and I wasn't expecting anyone. The sound startled me. When I opened the door, no one was there. Just a plain brown parcel resting on the porch. No name, no return address. I hesitated for a moment before bringing it inside. It wasn't heavy, but it felt significant somehow, like it was carrying more than its size suggested. I set it on the table and carefully unwrapped it. Inside was a small, leather-bound book, aged, fragile, its spine cracked from years of use. The sight of it stole my breath. I didn't need to open it to know what it was. It was my sister's old recipe book, the very same one she and I had filled with notes, stains, and laughter when we were young. We'd lost track of it after her death, or so I thought. I traced the edge of the cover with my fingertips, and my throat tightened. When I opened it, the familiar handwriting greeted me. Diana's looping, graceful script. Each page was a memory. Clara's favorite stew. Add extra thyme. Nora's lemon pie. Don't forget to taste before baking. For Sundays, when everyone needs comfort. And tucked between two pages was a small folded note, written in the same hand, but with a faint, newer ink. It read, So you'll never forget your place at the heart of this family. I stared at the note until the letters blurred through my tears. My sister's words, her love, had traveled across years and lost to find me again. I pressed the book to my chest, overwhelmed by emotion. It wasn't hard to figure out who had sent it. Clara. Of course it was Clara. She must have found it among her mother's old things and quietly arranged for it to reach me. Not with fanfare, not with an announcement, but with the quiet grace her mother had once had. The thought filled me with warmth. I imagined her smiling, proud of herself for one last surprise. For hours I sat at the table, turning each page, reading notes that felt like conversations from another life. I could almost smell the kitchens we once shared, the Sunday dinners, the laughter echoing off the walls. Every recipe carried a piece of our story, our bond, our love, our resilience. That afternoon, I received another kind of news, less sentimental, but no less powerful. A friend from town called me, voice full of gossip and disbelief. Did you hear about Richard? She asked. I hadn't, but the moment she said his name, I braced myself. He's in trouble, lost a big investment deal. Turns out his company's been struggling for months. The papers are calling it a financial collapse. I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly. Part of me expected to feel satisfaction, some triumphant burst of justice. But instead, all I felt was quiet. Not joy, not anger, just peace. The man who once measured his worth by power and control had lost both, and for the first time in decades, I didn't need to prove anything to him. Life had done that for me. Later that week, I packed a few of my old dishes and ingredients and brought them to the local shelter downtown. It was something I used to do with Diana before life became complicated. I spent the day cooking alongside volunteers, soups, bread, stews, simple food made with heart. When the director thanked me, I smiled and said, "It's what I was raised to do. Feed people with love." It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming the part of myself that had been buried under years of silence and judgment. Word spread around town about what had happened between Clara and me, about the speech, the inheritance, and Richard's downfall. People stopped me in the market to say kind things, some even apologizing for the way they'd believed the worst. I never said much. I didn't need to. Dignity had a quiet power of its own. One evening, as I was cleaning up after dinner, my phone rang. I saw Clara's name on the screen and couldn't help but smile. "Hi, sweetheart," I said. Her voice was bright but gentle. "Aunt Nora, I was wondering, could you come for dinner tomorrow?" I laughed softly. "You're inviting me for dinner now?" "This time," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You're the guest. No aprons, no trays, just family." For a long moment I couldn't speak. My throat closed up and tears filled my eyes again. Not from sadness, but from a fullness I couldn't describe. "I'll be there," I finally managed to say. After we hung up, I looked down at the recipe book still open on the table. My sister's handwriting seemed to shimmer in the fading light, her words glowing softly, "At the heart of this family." I smiled through the blur of tears, pressing my fingers against the page. Tomorrow, I wouldn't be serving the meal. I'd be part of it. And for the first time in years, I felt ready to sit at the table where I truly belonged. The next evening, I stood outside Clara's home, the soft glow of lights spilling through the windows. The laughter inside carried through the crisp night air. For a moment, I hesitated on the porch, holding my sister's recipe book close to my chest. It felt like she was walking beside me, like both of us were about to be welcomed home. The door opened before I could knock. Clara stood there, her smile wide and teary all at once. "You came," she said, her voice trembling with joy. "I promised I would," I replied, my heart swelling. She reached out and took my hand. "Then come in, Aunt Nora. Dinner's ready." The warmth inside hit me instantly. The smell of roasted herbs, freshly baked bread, and the faintest hint of lemon pie. My recipes. My sister's recipes, but not cooked by me. The dining room was alive with light and chatter. Clara's husband was setting the last of the dishes on the table, while friends and family I hadn't seen since the wedding filled the seats. For a moment, everything stilled when I entered, and then, one by one, they smiled. "Aunt Nora," someone said, "we saved you a seat." Clara led me to the head of the table, right beside her and her husband. It was the same position Richard had claimed at every family gathering for decades, the one he told me I wasn't worthy of. And now, it was mine. When I sat down, Clara reached across and gave my hand a gentle squeeze. "You belong here," she whispered. Dinner began, and the sounds of laughter and conversation filled the room again. Every dish that came out carried a story. The roast, the same one I'd made for the wedding, now tasted even better because it was seasoned with love, not obligation. The soup was exactly how my sister used to make it, and the lemon pie. It brought tears to my eyes before I even took a bite. "You cooked all this?" I asked, looking at Clara. She grinned. "With a little help from your recipe book." My throat tightened. "You did it perfectly," I said. "Even the crust." Clara laughed softly. "I had the best teacher." The table erupted with easy conversation, the kind I hadn't heard in years. There was no tension, no division, just the sound of belonging. People passed dishes, clinked glasses, shared stories. And through it all, I couldn't help but think of Diana. How proud she would be. Her daughter had grown into a woman of courage and heart, unafraid to right the wrongs of the past. As the meal wound down, Clara stood up and raised her glass. "Before we finish," she said, "I want to make one last toast." Everyone quieted, the clinking of forks and glasses fading into stillness. She looked at me, her eyes shining. To Aunt Nora, she began. The woman who fed us long before we understood what love really was. The one who kept our family alive in every sense of the word. My breath caught. She continued, her voice soft but sure. You've shown me that love isn't measured by what you're given, but by what you give, quietly, unconditionally. You taught me how to turn pain into strength and recipes into memories. This table, this family, wouldn't exist without you. There was a beat of silence, and then the room erupted into cheers and applause. Glasses clinked, chairs shifted, and I sat there, overwhelmed, my hands shaking as I tried to hold back tears. I don't know what to say, I whispered. You've already given me more than I ever dreamed of. Clara leaned in and hugged me tightly. You don't have to say anything. You've already said it. Through every meal, every kindness, every moment you showed up when no one else did. Around the table, people raised their glasses higher. To Aunt Nora, they shouted in unison. To family, I added softly, my voice breaking. And everyone echoed it back with warmth that filled the whole house. In that moment, something inside me finally settled. The anger, the humiliation, the years of being overlooked, they all melted away. I thought of Richard, of the bitterness that had consumed him, and for the first time, I didn't feel resentment. I just felt sorry, because he would never know the peace that came from letting go. I forgave him quietly in my heart, not for him, but for me. As the night drew to a close, Clara and I cleared the table together. But this time, it didn't feel like servitude, it felt like love. The plates clattered softly, the laughter continued in the living room, and I realized something I hadn't before. My place in this family had never really been lost. It had just been waiting for the right moment to be seen. When we finally sat down again, Clara poured me a small glass of wine. You okay? She asked. I smiled, the tears slipping free again. Not sad tears, but grateful ones. More than okay, I said. For the first time in years, I don't feel like I'm on the outside looking in. She tilted her head, curious. What do you feel like then? I looked at the table, the empty plates, the flickering candles, the circle of warmth that surrounded me, and answered quietly from the deepest part of my heart. For the first time in years, I didn't serve the table. I belonged to it. The room grew still for just a moment, the kind of silence that feels like peace. And somewhere in that silence, I could almost hear my sister's laughter, faint but certain, carried by the hum of the night. Love doesn't just feed the body, it nourishes the soul. And in that house, around that table, I was finally full. In the end, life didn't give me revenge, it gave me peace. I learned that respect can't be demanded, it's earned by how we love and forgive. My uncle lost what mattered most, but I found something far greater. A family that finally saw me. Sometimes justice doesn't shout. It simply sits beside you at the table, smiling. If this story touched your heart, maybe it's time we start honoring the quiet heroes in our own families. The ones who give without expecting anything in return. Share this story with someone who reminds you of Nora, someone who deserves to be seen and appreciated. And tell me one thing in the comments. Have you ever been treated like you didn't belong until life proved your worth?